Have you ever printed a big stack of gorgeous gel prints and then felt totally stuck on how to actually use them in a collage? You're not alone. In this video, I'll show you a simple way to choose your prints, narrow down a color scheme, and start building a cohesive collage without overthinking it. I've printed so many beautiful layered accent papers, and now it's time to use them. The first step is sorting them into color families. Here's how I group them: green, orange and warm tones, purple and blue, prints that include black, and eventually I had to add a pile for more neutral prints. Next, I want to choose a color scheme for today's collage. A color scheme is simply a combination of two or more colors used together to create a certain look or feel. You don't need to get too technical. Just having a general plan helps bring harmony to your composition. Looking at the color wheel gives us a few common options. Analogous colors refer to the ones that are beside each other on the color wheel. So, for example, blue, blue-violet, and violet are an example of analogous colors. Complementary colors are the ones that are opposite each other on the color wheel, such as orange and blue. And then there's triadic colors. Triadic colors form a triangle, like green, purple, and orange. I've used triadic colors a lot in my landscape painting days, but I haven't tried them in my collage work yet. So today's the day. I sorted through my green, orange, and purple piles and pulled out a few prints that might work well together. Then I added a few from the neutral pile and one with black for a bit of contrast. From here, I'll start playing with shapes and composition to bring everything together. When starting a new design, one of the first things to decide is the size of your support. That's what we call the format. Lately, I've been leaning towards vertical formats. I like the sense of movement that they give. And I want enough space to let those accent papers really shine and build up some rich, layered texture. And of course, I've got a botanical tissue print that I would like to include. It fits nicely on that size of canvas, so it feels like the right choice. The next thing I need to do is simply preview some of these papers. I want to see how they interact with each other. And to see if any natural placement sort of starts to work itself out. Of course, I'm going to be cutting all of these down to size and making shapes out of them. But it always is a good idea to have a feeling for where you need to head with it. I really like this one. A nice big chunk of this might be really attractive. It's a little bit lighter, so it doesn't necessarily need to anchor a corner. But I could see possibly a lovely big circle out of this somewhere in here. The next thing that I'm going to have to do is to start to actually cut some of these into smaller shapes. Now, with this big a canvas, I don't really want to make any of them teensy-weensy, although some smaller shapes might be very useful mixed in, but I do want to keep quite a few of these shapes fairly large. Let's talk about choosing shapes to work with. What kind of shapes are you drawn to? Do you like geometric shapes that bring structure to a piece? Or do you prefer more organic shapes that create a sense of flow? This is a very personal choice, and it's part of your unique visual language. One way to discover what you gravitate towards is by noticing shapes that catch your eye in a magazine, advertisements, or even everyday objects. Personally, I lean towards geometric shapes, but I like to mix in some irregular edges here and there to keep things interesting. I'm going to start off by tearing my papers into some usable chunks. This Yasimoto sketch paper tears really easily. And if I want a straight edge, I'll use a ruler. If I want a more free edge, I'll just free tear it. Some of these little bits are handy too. For shapes that are hard to tear, such as circles, I'll use a craft knife. When I'm doing circles, I like to look for areas that might be particularly interesting inside of the circle. I have a lot of these circle shapes just cut out from other projects, and they make really good little guides. When you're tearing up your papers, think about creating a variety of sizes. Repetition with variation is one of the foundations of good design. It helps keep the composition balanced but not boring. Also consider visual weight. Darker or more saturated shapes will feel heavier than lighter or more muted ones. That's something to keep in mind as you work towards balance in your piece. Playing with placement is the fun part. I love auditioning different shapes and colors simply by pushing them around. No other medium offers this kind of freedom. There's no commitment until the glue comes out. As I play with placement, I start to notice certain preferences emerging. As shapes get smaller and I start to shift into the fine tuning of the design. And I'm still at odds as to whether this piece of tissue will work with this, but I like to consider it. Now, if possible at this stage, I would like to rotate the entire piece to see how it looks from different directions. If the composition feels balanced in more than one direction, that's usually a good sign. And sometimes a weak spot becomes more obvious when you look at it from a different angle. Now, this is a bit messy to try to rotate. I'm going to end up moving all my papers at the same time. So what I'm going to do is take a photo of it and rotate it on my phone. That way I'll be able to see it from different directions, and I'll even be able to flip it into a mirror image, which can sometimes give you a fresh perspective that reveals something you hadn't noticed before. Once I'm happy with the layout, I do what I call the overnight test. I leave it alone and take a look at it again the next day with fresh eyes. If it still looks good, then I know I'm ready to commit, and out comes the glue. So here we go. I've started making the commitment to the pieces. I've got these pieces glued down, and now I want to think about more layering. And one of the questions that I need to think about is what needs to go under and what needs to go over what. Layering can provide rich texture and depth. So, for example, this one here, it's a fairly strong color. I wouldn't mind knocking that back a little bit. And this piece here, it has some of that color in it, so they kind of work together, but it also has some of the greens in it. So that might be a nice little piece to go over top of that. I also like to repeat papers. So if I have this pattern paper here, then possibly a piece down in here somewhere might help do that. Again, repetition with variation. Now, the other thing to think about is how do colors work with each other? If you want the area to be more eye-catching, then consider laying contrasting colors. So if I, for example, put a piece of this up here, right away that draws more attention to the eye than that by itself. Plus, of course, it also repeats this color down here. But I don't know, that might be too much. I have to think about that. Possibly you want areas to be quieter so that the papers to be layered actually need less contrast. So, for example, over here, I'm thinking that I don't really want a whole lot of contrast over there because I want that to be kind of a soft corner. But I might put just a little bit of a stronger green in there. That's something I could think about. Now, contrast is created by differences in value. So, for example, a dark value against a light value is created in differences in hue. So, the purple against the green and the orange. It can be created by color intensity. So, if I wanted to have a really strong contrast down here, I might put a contrasting color that's strong in intensity versus one that's quite low in intensity. And then there's always the idea, too, of can I work in some transparent tissues? This one here is already tissue. And basically the difference between one of my other papers and tissue paper is that you can see through the tissue. So I might want to put something like this, or just maybe even a chunk or a strip of this on here as one of the layers and then put other things on top. And I could also look at taking a tissue and putting it over some other area. But I have to remember that if this is a green, for example, and I put it over top of a purple, or I put it over top of an orange, it's going to become quite dull because the two colors will effectively optically mix together. So I have to decide what's the best place to use transparent tissues. Now, with all my cutting and trimming, I've got some quite interesting little small pieces that I could end up using in different spots. So that's my process, deciding which areas of the composition I want to have more color and texture, which areas I want to be more subdued, and then just working my way through it, adding a couple of pieces I feel pretty comfortable with, taking a look at it again, and then building it up from there. So I've made some more progress. Decided to keep some nice contrast in this corner and a little bit of contrast down in this corner. And again, kind of getting this diagonal thing happening. Although I'm sure there'll be more complexities built up in some other areas as well. So now I need to make a big decision. I have to decide whether I'm going to use this piece of tissue. It does have the greens in it and the purples and also some oranges. So, it really does fit quite well in with this piece. And I just have to decide whether I want to put on the whole thing or just a chunk. And do I want this in the middle, or would I prefer the plants coming up and through it like that? Kind of like that. So that looks pretty good. I think I would like this. Now, one thing I would like, however, to avoid is I don't want these lovely papers, especially these brighter areas, to become kind of cloudy. So I think I'd like to remove the part of the tissue that would be overlapping it, but still maintain some of this nice stuff that's going to be on a very light area that, wouldn't really matter. Um, I have to decide about this corner. I really do love this paper bear, though. Now, here's an interesting little tip that makes it very, very easy to get what you want out of this tissue and not have a whole lot of extra stuff. If I just use a water brush, or of course, if you don't have a water brush, you could just use a regular brush and some water. And I'm just going to basically draw a line around what I would like to get rid of. And then once it's gotten that little bit of damp with the water, it just basically comes apart. Now, this works if you're using regular tissue. It's not going to work if you're using wet strength tissue. Wet strength is, well, of course, it's strong when wet. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the stuff. So wet strength isn't going to come apart this easily for you. But if you're using what I use, which is Vector Art tissue, or if you're using like a dollar store type of tissue, that should work just fine. I like it as well because it creates a slightly fuzzy edge. And that, when you apply that onto this with glue, it kind of, fades itself out a little bit. I'm just going to get rid of this bottom piece. There. Okay. Now, by the way, I never throw anything away. This little scrap here, for example, could be just perfect for some other project. So, don't feel like you have to get rid of this stuff. There. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and apply that now for the next stage. Now, if you've been having problems with your tissues, your larger tissues wrinkling when you put them onto canvas or panel or whatever, I do have a video called 3 Tips. I put it out at the end of 2024 as just kind of a thank you to my viewers for building up my channel so well. So I thought I would give you guys three tips. So I have a quite extensive piece in that 3 tips about doing this gluing process. But basically, I hold it down firmly with one hand, pull it back up the top, I just use matte medium. I don't use anything thicker. I find matte medium just works fine. And I try to do, oh, I try not to get too ambitious. I've gotten myself in trouble when I've gotten too ambitious. A couple of inches at a time is plenty. And then I let it go down, smooth it out from the inside to the outside. So from the middle out like that. And then I like to put a coat of the matte medium on the top. It just seals it really well, and it gives me a chance to smooth out any wrinkles that I'm getting with my nice soft brush. Okay, so then I lift it up to where it was glued down. Uh, Basically go down another couple of inches, always with enough medium to get everything good and wet. There we go. I do love to see what happens as I put this down and the paper kind of goes transparent over different other sections, and it's always really interesting to see that. And of course it'll dry even more clear. And I won't have what I often get, which is a slight clouding of these other papers. I really want to keep these papers bright and lively this time. Not my neutral palette so much as this more sort of like a spring-like palette. Well, coming up next, more layers. But first, I need to let this dry. So I've added a couple more pieces of collage paper here and there. And I think the next thing I want to do is add a little bit of paint. And what I'm primarily wanting to do is just to bring out the design of the botanical in this area. Not too worried about the rest of it, but I'd like this white part to continue up through here, which is going to push that purple circle back and underneath it. And I might possibly glaze a little bit into this to pick up some of those colors as well. This circle I'm going to leave on top, and same thing with this one, but this one I want to push back. So I would also like to bring out some of the color in this area from the tissue. So I'm going to do some glazes. Now the glazes are just my same pigments that I've been using, but thinned out with a lot of medium. So just a touch of paint and a lot of medium. And if the medium is a little thick, I might even add a little bit of water into it as well. And I start fairly gently. I want to increase some of this color in the background, but I don't want to go too strong with it too quickly. You can kind of just move in slowly and see what the reaction is. And if you like it, you keep going. If it's too modest, well, you can add a second layer. That's not a problem. Soften an edge, which is nice. It's almost like working with a water medium. Well, it is a water medium, but you know what I mean. It's more like working with like a watercolor. The nice thing about glazes is that it allows the marks that are already there to show through. So you get a nice sort of mingling of information on the plate or on the canvas. So I don't completely obliterate all those fine marks by adding this glaze. I add information instead of removing it. I'm really liking how this piece is coming together, but I'd like to add something a bit more freeform to balance out the structure. I created some simple shapes using soft pastel on drawing paper and then transferred them onto tissue using the gel plate. If you're curious about that process, I have a full video on it called Pastel Transfer on the Gel Plate, Creating Smudge-Free Collage Papers. I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. It's a technique with so much potential. I've been pushing these shapes around on the composition for a while, and I think I'm getting ready to commit. Let's see how they work in the final design. I think I'm getting close to the finish, and I'm happy with the colors and the shapes and the overall balance of the piece. But I do feel the center of interest could use a little bit more emphasis. And for me, that's this area right here. To help draw the viewer's eye, I want to increase the contrast in that spot. I'll glaze over it using my main three colors to boost color intensity, and I'll deepen the surrounding areas to enhance the value contrast between them and the white botanical shapes. Now to do this, I'm just going to take a glaze of specific colors. I kind of know where I want them to go, and just go over them, kind of like I did before, but this time perhaps with a bit more pigment in them. So the first one I want to work with is the purple. And by the way, if you have a towel, a paper towel that's slightly damp, if you put something on and you really just don't like it, you can get rid of it pretty easily. And I like to start a little gently and work my way up because I find that works out better for me in the long run than the other way around. But that's what the paper towel's for. If I go too far too soon, I can just wipe it off with that. Now the layers underneath this glaze will show through. So, the fact that I've got a stronger line coming through there will still show up. And I like that because it means there will still be variations in the purple. It's not like I painted it and covered it up with an opaque paint. A glaze is simply a transparent color that's been thinned with medium to become, well, exactly that, transparent. And the more medium, the lighter it is. And if there's less medium and more pigment, well, then that will be darker. But you can see there how much more that's bringing that area out. And the contrast between the purple and the white draws the eye. There we go. I may give that a little bit more in a minute. Now I want to bring the green down in through here and up in through there. And the green's quite a light color. It's got a lot of yellow in it, just the lightest color on the color wheel. So it will actually end up with a darker glaze with more pigment in it. Now I don't want to do too much layering of, for example, the green over the purple or either of them over the orange, because that would lead to a dulling of the colors. You know, they optically mix and then they end up dull. So yeah, I want to keep the green in the green area and the purple in the purple area and the orange in the orange area. And there it is. Thanks for following along with me on this collage process. It's always exciting to see how layered gel prints and pastel transfers can come together in a finished piece. I hope this gave you some new ideas for working with your own stash, whether it's color, shape, or just the freedom to explore. If you enjoyed this video, sign up for my monthly newsletter for more tips. And if you try something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. See you next time.